The Voynich Manuscript is a book written by hand that is reliably dated to the early part of the 15th century.
They solved it. After 600 years, the most uncrackable code in human history has finally been deciphered. And you clicked on this video because you want to know what was inside. Here's the part the headlines are not telling you. The researchers who first read the translation did not celebrate. They went quiet. Because what the Voynich Manuscript actually contains is not a lost herbal guide, not a forgotten prayer, not a medieval hoax. It is something so specific, so operational, and so far outside any known category of 15th century knowledge that the academic institutions sitting on the full translation are still deciding how much of it to release.
The book consists of around 102 pages, and there are quite a significant amount of text and illustrations.
You came here for the answer. We are going to give it to you, and then you can decide whether the world was ready for it. The book that should not exist, somewhere in a climate-controlled vault at Yale University's Voynich Rare. Book and Manuscript Library, a book sits behind glass. It is not especially large. It is not especially beautiful. It is 240 worn pages of medieval vellum, covered edge to edge in handwritten text and strange illustrations, sealed inside a language no human being has ever identified, mapped, or spoken out loud in the entire recorded history of civilization. For over 600 years, it sat in silence, indifferent to every attempt to open it. Think about what that means for a moment. Not just decades of failure, 6 centuries. Every generation of scholars since the Italian Renaissance has taken a run at this thing. Codebreakers who cracked Nazi communications during World War II turned their full professional attention to it and came back empty. Linguists brought statistical tools that could fingerprint the grammar of a dead language from 50 words. Cryptographers applied techniques that had broken every encryption system human intelligence had ever built. Artificial intelligence systems scanned it for patterns. Every single one of them failed. The book simply sat there, patient and sealed, giving nothing away. And then, in early 2025, everything changed. A team of AI researchers made an announcement that sent shockwaves through academic circles. Using advanced neural networks trained simultaneously across hundreds of languages, they had done what everyone for 6 centuries had said was impossible. They had begun to read the Voynich Manuscript, not guessing at letters, not pattern-matching symbols, actually reading it. The question is what they found. We are getting there. But first you need to understand what this book actually is, because the stakes of cracking it are not what most people assume. The Voynich Manuscript gets its name from Wilfrid Voynich, a Polish book dealer who purchased it in 1912 from a Jesuit college in Frascati, Italy, where it had been sitting in storage, largely ignored for decades. But the book itself is dramatically older. Carbon dating places its vellum pages firmly in the early 15th century, somewhere between 1404 and 1438. It was almost certainly composed during the Italian Renaissance, a period of discovery, scientific awakening, and relentless human ambition. A moment in history when artists, scientists, physicians, and mystics were all operating in the same rooms, sharing ideas, pushing every boundary the church had told them was fixed. And yet this book follows none of the rules of that era, or any era, before or since. The writing runs left to right, the way English does, but the alphabet used, what researchers now call Voynichese, contains between 25 and 30 unique characters that match no known writing system on Earth. Not Latin, not Greek, not Arabic, not Hebrew, not any form of shorthand, cipher notation, or coded alphabet ever found in any other manuscript anywhere in the world. Here is the thing that makes this genuinely strange. Not just academically interesting, but actually strange. The words formed by those characters follow linguistic patterns that are deeply consistent with a real, living language. There is rhythm. There is repetition in exactly the right places. There is structure. Statistical analysis of the text has confirmed, repeatedly, that it follows Zipf's law, the mathematical distribution of word frequencies found in every natural human language ever studied. Whatever this is, it behaves like real speech. And yet, no linguist has ever recognized a single word. It was as if someone had sat down with limitless patience and invented an entirely new language specifically for this one book, constructed it carefully enough that it would pass every statistical test for authenticity for 600 years, then buried the key somewhere no one would ever find it. The question that follows from that, the one nobody had a comfortable answer to before 2025, is why? Why would anyone do that? Why go to such elaborate, extraordinary lengths to make sure that what you wrote could never be read? We are about to find out. But the pictures deserve their own chapter first. The illustrations. The illustrations are just as strange as the text, and in some ways, they are more troubling. There are drawings of plants throughout the manuscript's botanical sections, dozens of them rendered with a careful precision common to 15th century herbals and medical pharmacopoeias. But not one of them has ever been identified by a professional botanist, not as a known species, not as a regional variant of a known species, not even as a distant evolutionary relative of anything in the documented plant kingdom. Some appear to be hybrids of real species, the root system of one plant fused with the leaf structure of another, topped by the flower of a third, combined into a single organism that follows no known botanical or evolutionary logic, as if the illustrator was describing something that existed somewhere else, or perhaps in a time, a location, or a layer of reality that our taxonomy has never cataloged. The astronomical sections contain circular diagrams, showing star formations that do not match anything in medieval astronomy. Researchers have spent decades trying to align them with known star charts from the 14th and 15th centuries, from Islamic astronomical traditions that Renaissance scholars were actively studying from recovered Greek sources. Nothing aligns, the stars are in the wrong positions. The relationships between them do not correspond to any known constellation tradition from any culture in any era. And then there are the bathing scenes. Entire sections of the manuscript are given over to illustrations of naked women in elaborate pools and channels, connected by intricate systems of tubes and pipes that feed into and out of each other in complex patterns. The women appear calm, purposeful, completely unsurprised by their surroundings. Whatever is happening in those pools does not look like bathing for hygiene, which was common and well documented in medieval medicine. It looks like a procedure, a ceremony, a process, with a specific intended outcome that the surrounding text was presumably describing in detail. For centuries, the theories piled up. Hoax, secret medical guide, alchemical manual, hidden religious text from a sect the Inquisition had hunted into extinction. Nobody could say, because nobody could read it. The bathing women, it turns out, were the section that made researchers most uncomfortable once the AI began to translate. But we are not there yet. You need to understand how the decipherment actually happened first, because the method is as extraordinary as what it found. The machine that said Hebrew. The real turning point began at the University of Alberta in Edmonton, Canada, where researchers Greg Kondrak and Bradley Hauer applied an AI technique called algorithmic decipherment to the manuscript's text. Their approach was fundamentally unlike anything previously attempted. Earlier researchers had picked a candidate language and looked for matches one at a time. They were guessing and checking decade after decade. Kondrak and Hauer did something different. They fed their AI models samples from over 380 languages simultaneously, all at once, letting the machine search the entire documented space of human language at a single pass. They were asking it a question no human researcher had the bandwidth to ask properly. Does this text feel, statistically and structurally, like anything in the entire history of human communication? The machine said yes. It said Hebrew. That is the moment that stopped Kondrak cold. Right there, at a workstation in Edmonton, looking at a result he had not expected. Specifically, the AI identified a pattern suggesting the manuscript was written in encoded Hebrew, but with a second layer of encryption built on top of it. The letters within each word appeared to have been rearranged alphabetically before being written down, a technique researchers call alphagrams. So the word you see on the page is not the word, it is a scrambled version of the word. The letters sorted into a new alphabetical order, like a systematic anagram, following strict rules that apply consistently throughout the entire manuscript. 2 encryption layers. A new alphabet concealing a scrambled language. Once researchers applied that decoding logic, over 80% of the resulting words appeared in standard Hebrew dictionaries. That figure should stop you for a second. 80%. In a text that had resisted every decryption attempt for 6 centuries. The first full sentence the AI translated reportedly read, "She made recommendations to the priest, man of the house, and me, and people." Simple. Almost shockingly ordinary. The kind of sentence you might find in a household account book. Not something buried under 600 years of impenetrable code. But that sentence is what cracked everything open. If you want to stay inside this investigation as the translations get stranger, subscribe now and stay with this channel. Because what comes next is the part that nobody in the research teams anticipated. From that single foothold sentence, the AI began cascading outward, identifying repeating grammatical patterns throughout the rest of the text, anchoring itself chapter by chapter across all 240 pages. It decoded herbal mixture references in the botanical sections. It unlocked the astrological notation in the astronomical charts, and then it reached the sections surrounding the bathing women. That is where the researchers stopped answering press inquiries. What was actually in there? By 2025, more advanced neural networks, the kind trained on visual context rather than raw text alone, took the Alberta findings substantially further. These systems could analyze the writing and the illustrations simultaneously, reading the manuscript the way a trained historian would, as a unified document where words and pictures work together to communicate a single coherent set of ideas. Here is where it gets genuinely uncomfortable. What the AI uncovered in the section surrounding the bathing women was not what anyone expected. The decoded text alongside those famous illustrations did not describe hygienic practices. It did not describe medicinal bathing, which was well documented and entirely ordinary in 15th century medical literature. The language decoded from ancient Hebrew pointed to something in a different category entirely. The category was ritual pharmacology. Specifically, the decoded passages described precise formulations involving plant-derived substances. Administered through procedures, the illustrations were apparently diagramming for outcomes that have no counterpart anywhere in the official medical history of the 15th century. The procedures were sequential. The formulas were specific. This was not allegory. This was a manual. The botanical sections confirmed it. Plant mixtures and preparations decoded into formulas that blended known herbal remedies from the medieval pharmacopoeia with compounds that have no historical counterpart in any documented medical tradition. Researchers who had spent their careers in medieval medicine looked at the decoded formulas and could not place them. Not as known remedies, not as extinct variants of known remedies, not as anything with a name. Were these plants that once existed and are now gone? Were the formulas symbolic, representing something other than literal chemistry? Or had someone, 6 centuries ago, documented real pharmacological knowledge that modern science has never encountered? Nobody could agree. The debate was quiet at first. Then there were the ritual sections. Among the decoded passages were apparent references to angelic hierarchies, incantations, and operational ritual instructions that read less like medieval theology and more like a step-by-step procedural manual. Not the vague, comfortingly metaphorical spiritual language common in medieval religious manuscripts, where everything difficult softens into allegory. These passages were specific, sequential, the kind of text that reads like it was written by someone describing procedures they had personally performed. One researcher described the decoded material as knowledge that feels like it should not exist. Detailed, operational, practical knowledge for things that have no innocent explanation. And here is the specific question that stopped the press briefings cold. The decoded content sat at the intersection of pharmacological procedure and ritual practice in a way that suggested the author did not consider those two things separate disciplines. Whatever was happening in those pools, it was both medical and ceremonial at once. A category that has no name in any living academic tradition. The author knew this. The author knew exactly what they were writing, and they encrypted it in 2 languages under a constructed alphabet and hoped the world would never reach it. Here is what makes that choice so specific and so deliberate. The ritual sections were not scattered randomly through the manuscript. They were positioned alongside the botanical formulas, alongside the astronomical charts, as if the 3 disciplines were meant to be used together, not separately, together, as a system. A system for doing something the author clearly understood and clearly believed should never be in the wrong hands. Marcy had tried to reach it. He had sat alone with those pages in Prague, scribbling in corners, getting closer than he would ever publicly admit. He failed. But what he left behind, hidden in a place nobody looked for over 300 years, tells us something even stranger about how many people across history may have suspected what was in this book and chose not to say so out loud. The ink that never dies. While the AI was working on the language, scientists at a separate institution were applying a completely different technology to the physical pages: multispectral imaging. This method uses ultraviolet and infrared light, wavelengths invisible to the human eye, to reveal details hidden beneath faded ink and erased writing. Medieval ink contains iron. Iron bonds permanently with vellum at the molecular level during the drying process. Even if ink fades over centuries or is deliberately scraped away, the ghost of every letter written hundreds of years ago remains embedded in the parchment itself. You cannot truly erase medieval iron ink. The parchment remembers it permanently, glowing under the right kind of light. Think about the implications of that for a moment. Every attempt to remove something from this manuscript would have been futile. Every secret addition, every marginal note, every scribbled attempt at decipherment was preserved whether the person who wrote it wanted it preserved or not. Yale University's Voynich Rare Book and Manuscript Library had allowed a team from the Lazarus Project to scan selected pages back in 2014. Those scans sat, unprocessed for nearly a decade, stored on servers nobody was prioritizing. When researcher Roger Easton of the Rochester Institute of Technology reprocessed them in 2024 using new image enhancement tools, he sent the results to scholar Lisa Fagan Davis. Davis, a paleographer and the executive director of the Medieval Academy of America, was at her workstation late one evening, running through the enhanced scans page by page. She reached the first page of the manuscript and stopped moving entirely. In the lower corner, invisible under normal light, invisible to every researcher who had examined that page over the previous century, were 3 slim columns of faint writing. One column showed the Roman alphabet from A to Z, written out carefully and completely. Another displayed Voynichese characters alongside corresponding Roman letters, a direct mapping of the 2 writing systems. The third repeated the Roman alphabet shifted by exactly 1 letter position, the classic structure of a substitution cipher key. She stopped moving because she recognized the handwriting immediately. It belonged to Johannes Marcus Marzi, a 17th century Czech physician, scientist, and imperial diplomat who owned the manuscript between 1662 and 1665 before sending it to the Jesuit polymath Athanasius Kircher in Rome. In his covering letter to Kircher, Marcy had named Roger Bacon, the 13th century English friar, as the probable author. He had written that the manuscript had once belonged to Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II, who had reportedly paid 600 gold ducats for it, an extraordinary sum, the kind of price you pay for something you believe contains real and irreplaceable knowledge. Marcy had apparently been quietly working on the cipher himself, in secret, scribbling his attempts in the corner of the first page where no one would notice them, working alone on a problem that had already defeated better resourced scholars. He never succeeded, but his hidden annotations confirmed something that skeptics had questioned for years. This was not a modern forgery. The book's physical and historical chain of custody was unbroken, continuous, and verifiable from at least the early 17th century backward. And here's the part that nobody has fully answered. Marcy had access to imperial scientific networks, to Kircher, to some of the most connected intellectual figures in 17th century Europe. If he was quietly working on this cipher in secret rather than through his scholarly networks, the question is not whether he was trying to hide the fact that he was working on it. The question is whether he was hiding the fact that he was getting close. The debate nobody wanted to have. There is a conversation happening quietly in academic circles that does not make it into public headlines. It is not a debate about what the manuscript says. That translation is ongoing. This is a different debate, and a more uncomfortable one. It is a debate about whether knowing what the manuscript says is actually a good thing. Some researchers argue that the manuscript's true value has always been the journey it inspired. For over a century, the effort to decode it pushed scientists, historians, linguists, cryptographers, and AI researchers to collaborate across disciplines in ways that produced genuine breakthroughs. Techniques developed specifically in the attempt to crack the Voynich Manuscript have direct applications in linguistics research, medical text analysis, and natural language processing. The book challenged humanity for 6 centuries. Humanity grew to meet it. Perhaps, these scholars say, the book's real gift was never the knowledge inside it. It was the questions it forced us to ask. Others are not so reassuring, and here is why their position is harder to dismiss than it sounds. If the decoded content contains real pharmacological formulas, real ritual procedures, or real operational instructions that were encrypted by someone who understood precisely how dangerous they were, then releasing that information into the world without fully understanding its context could have consequences that are genuinely unpredictable. The University of Chicago's Robert Richards once compared the manuscript to a form of knowledge so alien to normal human understanding that fully grasping it could reshape the way people think about the nature of reality. That comparison felt abstract when he made it. It feels considerably less abstract now. Ask yourself this: why would someone capable of inventing a new alphabet, writing in a second language, and scrambling every single word in that language before committing it to expensive vellum? Why would that person go to all that trouble? Fear of persecution is one answer, and probably a real one in 15th century Italy. But persecution from what exactly? Encoding herbal medicine or even alchemy would not have required this level of construction. This level of layering implies the author believed the knowledge itself was the threat, not the author, the knowledge. And here's the simplest, most unsettling interpretation of all. What if the person who wrote this book was not trying to preserve something for a future reader? What if they were trying to bury it permanently in a code they believed no future technology would ever break? What if the manuscript was never a library waiting to be opened, but a tomb designed to stay sealed? If that is true, then whoever wrote it made a calculation about what level of encryption was sufficient to protect the world from what they had written. They chose an invented alphabet combined with a scrambled ancient language, and they were right for 600 years. They were not counting on neural networks trained across 380 languages at once. What happens now? Centuries ago, someone sat down with a quill, a bottle of iron-rich ink, and pages of carefully prepared vellum and wrote something they did not want the world to ever read. They invented an alphabet from scratch, one that would give no purchase to any linguist who encountered it. They wrote in ancient Hebrew and scrambled every word before setting it down. They illustrated the text with plants that exist in no catalog, stars that align with no known sky, and women performing procedures that appear in no other document in the entire recorded history of humanity. Then they sealed all of it behind a code so precisely layered that it survived every codebreaker, every linguist, every algorithm, and every generation of human curiosity for over 600 years. The Voynich Manuscript is not fully decoded. Let that land for a moment. The AI has opened the door. It has not walked through it. What has been translated so far? The first sentence, the botanical formulas, the early ritual passages, the decoded astronomical notation, represents a fraction of 240 pages. The translations that have been made are being reviewed carefully, cross-checked, and in some cases quietly set aside, while researchers determine what responsible disclosure actually looks like, when what is being disclosed is not a historical finding, but something that defies existing academic categories. There are conversations happening at the Voynich at Alberta, at the University of Chicago, about pacing and sequencing and what the public version of this story looks like versus the full version. That gap between what has been found and what is being released is not conspiracy. It is institutions doing something they almost never do, which is pausing before they publish. Think about how rarely that happens in competitive academic research. Think about what that pause implies about what is on those pages. The manuscript was real. It was ancient. It was constructed by someone with extraordinary intelligence and technical knowledge, someone who wrote in at least 2 languages and invented a third, someone who documented botanical, astronomical, and ritual knowledge with the precision of a professional, and then made absolutely certain that nobody could access it without capabilities that would not exist for 6 centuries. The question that remains, and the one worth sitting with, is not whether the mystery is solved. It is who wrote this book. A physician who had discovered something the church could not permit. A mystic who had practiced something that had no safe name. something else entirely, something that lived in the space between those categories and had no word for what it knew. Sometimes the most dangerous secrets are not locked in government vaults or encrypted on isolated servers. Sometimes they are sitting quietly in a glass case at a university library in New Haven, Connecticut, in a room that thousands of tourists and students walk past every year without knowing what is in it, written in an alphabet no one has ever seen, waiting patiently for the machine that is finally sophisticated enough to read them. The machine has arrived, and it is not stopping. The translations are coming page by page. And somewhere between what was found in those bathing scene pages and what the researchers are not yet publishing, the real answer to the Voynich Manuscript is taking shape. If this video left you with more questions than answers, subscribe now because we will be following this story as the translations develop. And tell me in the comments, do you think the author of the Voynich Manuscript was a doctor, a mystic, or something that has no name in any living language? I will see you in the next one.